Good morning, and welcome to this seminar entitled Hearts versus Minds in the Struggle for Selangor. My name is Francis Hutchinson, and I'm the coordinator of the Malaysia Studies Programme at this institute. So on August the 12th, many Malaysians will be heading to the voting booths again, as citizens in 6 of the country's 13 states will be picking their representatives for their state assembly. In the past, Malaysia's elected politicians very considerately held state elections along with parliamentary ones. However, along with so much else in Malaysia, the times are a-changing. So while the dust has barely settled from last November's parliamentary election, analysts are framing the upcoming elections as a referendum on Anwar Ibrahim's leadership. Of the 6 states heading to the polls, 3 are urbanized, ethnically mixed states on the peninsular west coast, and 3 are northern, rural, and more ethnically homogeneous. Collectively, these polls are a good cross-section of the country and will constitute a good barometer of people's feelings towards the unity government. Looking at the breakdown of voting patterns of the state seats within each parliamentary constituency from GE15 suggests that on August 12th, the status quo will hold, namely that Perikatan Nasional will retain its control over the states of Kedah, Kelantan, and Terengganu, and that Pakatan Harapan and its new partner coalition, Barisan Nasional, will remain in power in Penang, Negeri Sembilan, and Selangor. In a reflection of Malaysia's increasingly polarized political context, many of these seats were won with solid majorities and can withstand some erosion without changing the ultimate outcome. However, while many subscribe to this outlook, others are beginning to question if Selangor in particular is really all that secure for Anwar Ibrahim's unity government. The state has a large number of Malay majority constituencies, and there are indications, including some surveys, that Perikatan Nasional, comprised of Malay-led focused Bersatu and PAS, as well as the multiracial Gerakan Party, is making headway in the state. As any financial services representative will tell you, past performance is no guarantee of future results. Voters respond to many signals and cues in dynamic fashion, and indeed may not even show up on the day. In addition, while past performance can shed light on how the market reacts to established quantities, Anwar Ibrahim's unity government, comprising former foes Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional, is a new entity that voters and analysts are struggling to come to terms with. To help us make sense of past trends, current feelings, and future possibilities, we are joined today by 2 experts who straddle politics and academia. Kian Ming is director of the Philosophy, Politics, and Economics program at Taylor's University in Malaysia. He is former Democratic Action Party MP for Bangi, former Deputy Minister of International Trade and Industry, and he's currently a senior visiting fellow at ISEAS. Marzuki Mohamad is an associate professor in the Department of Political Science at the International Islamic University Malaysia. He's also a trustee of Institut Masa Depan Malaysia, a local think tank focusing on social, economic, and political research. He is also the former principal private secretary to the 8th Prime Minister of Malaysia, Muhyiddin Yassin. Today's format is going to be a little bit different from our usual structure. So both speakers have shared some of their findings via our ISEAS Perspective series, and this has generated considerable debate across various social media platforms. Consequently, we're going to structure this to allow for each person to share their findings first before engaging in a debate. So to kick off, each speaker will have 15 minutes to share their presentations. Kian Wing will go first, and then this will be followed by Marzuki. Then Marzuki will have 5 minutes to ask questions of Kian Wing. Kian Wing will have 10 minutes to respond, followed by 5 minutes to ask Marzuki questions of his own, and then Marzuki will have 10 minutes to address these questions. After this, we're going to have about 25 minutes for Q&A. So please use the Q&A function below to post comments and questions pertaining to what we're talking about. And for technical issues, please use the chat function. In another departure from standard practice, we will not be invoking the Chatham House rule today, so contents of the presentations delivered, as well as the ensuing debate and questions, can indeed be cited. So with this, if I can invite now Kian Wing to share his presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to Francis, my old friend Marzuki, to all who are listening in. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to ISEAS for organizing this very timely debate as we go into the nominations of the candidates this Saturday at the 6 state elections. I'm sure there will be much more attention on these state elections compared to before. And I'd like to just use this opportunity to share some of my views, and also looking forward to having a civilized debate with Marzuki. So just to show that, we can have civilized debate, in contrast to sometimes what we see in Parliament in Malaysia. So with that, I hope that you can see my screen. Go to slideshow now, and then begin. Okay, doc. Yeah, so this is going to be the format of my discussion or my presentation. I'm going to talk about the issue of vote transferability by focusing on what I did or what I wrote for ISEAS Perspectives in part 1 a couple of weeks ago, and also do a little bit of a comparison to what Marzuki has found in his own study as well. Then I'll go on to the issue of seat allocation, especially among the PH parties, together with the seats that have been allocated to UMNO since MCA and MIC are no longer part of the campaign ecosystem now, because they have said that they will set out this campaign. And then I think importantly, I want to spend a bit more time on the campaign trail. I mean, not literally, but talking about some of the important issues and strategies that will be raised during the campaign. I'll highlight why the campaign actually matters more this time compared to before or previous elections. I'll quickly go through some campaign issues and strategies among the different coalitions. And then I'll talk about the popularity of leaders and their parties before going into some of the governing narratives, which I think are important at the federal and state level in a place like Selangor. And then I'll conclude with sort of like a hypothetical situation, which I call a black swan and domino theory. And I'm sure, Marzuki would want to respond to that, or may want to respond to that later on when I ask him some follow-up questions based on this theory. With that, I'd like to go to the first issue, which is the question of vote transferability. These are the results from the 15th general election, whereby I have gotten the results from the at the Saluran polling station level, and have added them up and distributed them according to the respective state seats. I did not include postal votes and early votes because those votes are hard to allocate to the different state seats, but I think the results won't change significantly. So you can see, using the election results from Selangor in GE15, Pakatan Harapan would have won 40 out of 56 state seats. This gives Pakatan, I think, quite a comfortable majority because under this scenario, PN or Perikatan Nasional only manages to win 14 seats and then BN 2 seats. However, I also take note that, like what Francis said, many of these seats, were won with not so stellar majorities. So 29 out of 56 state seats, more than half, slightly more than half, were won by less than 50% of the vote, right? So in sort of like political science parlance, these would be considered, somewhat as a marginal seats. So there is a lot of room for contestation in Selangor, which is why I think this state will be the hot state in the upcoming state elections. Probably the only one where the outcome is a little bit more uncertain compared to the other 5. This is something that I wrote in a Perspective article a couple of weeks back, shortly after Marzuki's own Perspective article was published. And this is where I posited 3 scenarios for PH and BN, whereby in scenario one, there is a low transferability of votes from PH to BN, only 30%. Scenario two, which is a neutral scenario, where there's a 50% transferability between BN and PH. And then scenario three is a high transferability between PH and BN, between BN and PH of 70%. In all of these scenarios, I assume a relatively high transfer of votes between PH to BN. This would be largely non-Malay voters who would be, although may not be so used to voting for BN, but I think because of larger political considerations, many of them would choose to vote for BN at much higher rates and transfer the votes to BN at much higher rates compared to BN to PH. So even under this low transferability scenario, you can see that PH and BN actually manages to win 43 out of 56 seats. And the reason why this is the case is because, BN benefits more with in terms of its cooperation with PH, because it is then able to capture a lot of the non-Malay support that it was not able to capture in the past few election cycles. Right. So under this scenario, PH would still manage to retain Selangor quite comfortably, together with BN's seats as well. So I think the survey by Masa indicates that the bad outcome of low transferability from BN to PH is highly possible. That's where we see, Marzuki in his co-author, Khairul, hypothesized that 7 out of 10 BN Malay voters who have made up their minds say that they will vote for PN rather than PH. So even under this scenario, my own calculations shows that it is likely that PH plus BN will continue to hold on to Selangor. Although my Black Swan theory is an exception to this view. I move on now to the issue of seat allocation, just to give a little bit more flavor, to this discussion. The seat allocation has been finalized on the part of PH and BN, whereby PH will be contesting 44 out of 56 state seats in Selangor. The allocation is 20 for PKR, 15 for DAP, and 9 for UMNO. Just after the 14th general election, PKR, DAP, and Amanah held 45 out of 56 state seats, and Bersatu held another six seats, and then UMNO held another 2 seats. So the allocation, was relatively straightforward, whereby all of the UMNO held 4 seats, so Bersatu plus UMNO is 10 seats. So the seat allocation process was relatively simple. All of the seats that Bersatu contested in would be given to UMNO to contest. So all 6 state seats that were won by Bersatu, UMNO would contest in those seats. Of course, this includes the Semenyih state seat that was won by UMNO in a by-election shortly after GE14. And then in addition, 1 PKR seat, which is Gombak Setia, where the incumbent Muhammad, it's not Hilman, it's Hilman, sorry. He defected to Bersatu. He was a special officer and also a very close ally of Azmin Ali. So he defected after the Sheraton move, and this seat was given to UMNO because the state chief of UMNO, Dato' Megat, is the division head of Gombak, and he needed a seat to contest in. So the PKR allocated this seat to him because there was no incumbent from PKR. In addition, 1 DAP seat, Dusun Tua, was given to UMNO. And I should have put this there as well. UMNO actually gave 1 seat called Hulu Benam in the Hulu Selangor area to Amanah. So I think all in all, even though the negotiation process may not have been that smooth in the beginning, I think at the end of the day, the relevant the leader stepped in, and then they did the necessary negotiations, and I think the relevant parties, all the parties in the unity government, are ready to go into the state elections. I have to say that I was aware of some of the challenges with regards to DAP conceding one of the 16 seats that my party won in the 14th general election, which was the Dusun Tua state seat. This seat was taken from DAP and given to UMNO, and this was a decision that was made by the Prime Minister. And after consultation with the DAP Secretary General, it was agreed on that there will be certain concessions that will be given to the DAP, including reassurance that DAP would continue to hold on to the position of the Speaker of the House, assuming that PH plus BN wins control of the state government. So I think this points to some of the challenges on the ground, and this will be discussed in greater detail when I talk about the campaign. And of course, UMNO ends up contesting in 12 state seats. We can talk about that, in terms of their chances later on during the Q&A session. And interestingly, PN has yet to announce their candidates at internal seat allocation at the time of this presentation. Although I'm fairly confident that all this has been settled, I'm sure Marzuki will be able to confirm that. Okay, why does the campaign matter more this time? I think for a few reasons. It's the first time that BN and PH are campaigning together as members of the unity government, and this is not including the campaign that was run shortly after GE15 in the parliamentary seat of Padang Serai and the state seat of Tioman in Pahang, where there were candidates that passed away during the campaign in GE15. I think the level of cooperation or the lack thereof will be more evident during the campaign period, and this is something that we can see already get to sense on the ground, but it will become much more apparent, much more dynamic, and probably will be reported more in the press in terms of some of the local dynamics of cooperation. Where cooperation is high between PH and BN, in some of the marginal seats like Sungai Pelek in Sepang, which is contested by the DAP, I think it would matter a lot in terms of whether DAP is able to retain this seat with the support of UMNO. In areas where, for example, in Semenyih, where UMNO is fielding a new Wanita candidate, and without the support of some of the PH grassroots leaders and members, UMNO may find it difficult to win this seat or retain this seat. The narrative also during the campaign will evolve as there will be back and forth between key leaders at the state and national level, responding to different issues. And then lastly, the possibility of one ceramah speech being edited, being viral, and then having an effect on the campaign is definitely not to be ignored. We saw an example of that in GE15 when noted ceramah speaker in the DAP ceramah circuit, Hugh Kwan Yao, otherwise known as Superman, one of his last speeches, I think 1 or 2 nights before the polling day, was translated, a caption in Bahasa Malaysia and went viral to, I think, and that actually probably cost Pakatan Harapan a few percentage points in terms of Malay support. So this is something that we should look out for. Okay, quickly, campaign issues and strategies. I think this is quite obvious. For PH, I think campaign issues will be, highlighting the need for an inclusive and representative government. Another one would be attacking PN for having their own court cluster. And then, of course, I think capitalizing on the relative popularity of Anwar Ibrahim among different segments of society. I think the campaign strategy would be, announcing people-friendly policy changes, now and probably some of it may happen during the state elections as part and parcel of the federal government's responsibilities. Whether or not there will be new corruption charges against PN leaders, I think that's something that we are waiting to see. And I wrote this a month ago, possible deportation of Jolo back to Malaysia. And again, this was highlighted in the news 1 or 2 days ago when one of the two authors of the $1 billion whale speculated that there may be a deal between the Malaysian government and the Chinese government to bring Jolo back to Malaysia. And then also last one, campaigning together with UMNO, especially in the Malay majority areas. Okay, quickly, I think BN will have a similar strategy in terms of having to explain to its voter base why it's better to work with PH than to work with PN. And then also explaining the advantages of being in the unity government and how that can help the Malay voter base and also their supporters. And then lastly, highlighting the need for political stability. Right. So campaign strategy, I think, I put this down about 2 weeks ago, hoping perhaps that UMNO would introduce more younger candidates in the state of Selangor. But unfortunately, I think the latest lineup that was revealed by UMNO in Selangor has not been that inspiring. Many old faces, and even the new faces, they are not particularly young or dynamic. So this may affect UMNO's chances in Selangor, and people are even talking about the possibility of UMNO being whitewashed, winning 0 seats in Selangor. Okay, PN, quickly, the playbook is there, attacking BN's cooperation with PH, especially with the DAP, highlighting the unity government's response to the Kalimah Allah issue. Now this has been supplanted by the recent events in Selangor involving a certain overseas ban called 1975. Continuing to attack the leadership of Zahid Hamidi, who is not very popular among the Malay voter base, and then also focusing on bread and butter issues such as inflation and the cost of living, and also the weak ringgit. This is where I think on the campaign strategy side, PN still has a little bit of an advantage because they have not announced their candidate list yet. So I think that there will be more interesting candidates, on the PN side because they're starting on a clean slate. And then in places where there are popular former UMNO leaders such as Noor Omar and Tanjung Karang, they also may be fielded to give PN a boost. Of course, there are some people who are speculating, maybe my good friend and popular DJ and podcast host Khairul Jamuluddin may throw his hat into the ring and declare himself as a candidate for Perikatan Nasional. That may still happen. But I don't think it is that likely. So we'll have to wait and see. That may be one of the reasons why Perikatan is still holding back on its candidate list to see what kind of other surprises it wants to introduce into the political landscape. And then lastly, Muda, I think they will play a very interesting role to see whether they can be a potential spoiler. But I think they are in it for the long haul because they want to show that they can be a legitimate third force in this country. Okay. On the campaign trail, just want to finish off by talking about popularity of leaders. And I take 2 perspective articles that was written by Marzuki with different co-authors. The one on top is what he has written recently and published, talking about the perception of national leaders' performance, where Anwar Ibrahim percentage of satisfied among the Malay voters was 43%. Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin stood at 60%, and then Zahid Hamidi stood at 17%. But even though I think this shows Tan Sri Muhyiddin's relative popularity among the Malays, and it's higher than Datuk Sri Anwar, I also want to point out that in an earlier article that was written by Marzuki and Ben Sufyan, a noted pollster, Muhyiddin's support was actually higher than 60%. It was actually at 71%. And Anwar's support was actually at 32%. So between the time of these 2 articles, Muhyiddin's support dropped from 71% to 60%. It may not be a like-to-like comparison, but I just used the figures that were produced in these 2 perspective pieces. And then at the same time, Anwar Ibrahim's support actually increased from 32% to 43%. Even Zahid Hamidi's performance or support increased slightly from 12% to 17%. And I think this may be because there was a small boost, perhaps from being in power, as a result of Datuk Sri Anwar becoming the Prime Minister, and then also Zahid Hamidi becoming the Deputy Prime Minister. Okay, this is where I think the the campaign trail issue in Selangor will be very, very important. PH has already announced the caretaker Menteri Besar, Datuk Sri Amiruddin, will be retained as Selangor Menteri Besar if PH as well as BN retains control of the state. But Perikatan has not announced their own candidate for the MP of Selangor as well. Okay, last thing on campaign trail, I think the governing narratives matter at the state and federal level because in Selangor, it is the most developed state in the country. The voters are actually very, very sophisticated, both Malay and non-Malay voters. And I think because of the different narratives that are happening at the federal and state levels on the part of the opposition, as well as on the part of the government, it is actually very important for all sides to provide a compelling governing narrative. So for PN, it will be talking about how they used to govern, and then for PH, it will be talking about how PH wants to govern and is governing. Although 3R issues would play an important part, I think the policy issues also would make a difference. And I think this is where PH has advantages from being in power at the federal and state level, as well as disadvantages, because it's always easier to take pot shots at those who are in government. Believe me, I've been there before, and I'm sure Marzuki also can testify to that, having been in that position before as well. Okay, lastly, I want to talk about this black swan event and the domino theory, which may lead to the fall of the unity government. And I thought I put this out there just to give people something to talk about and write about, especially those who are journalists who are listening in now. I think in the situation where the unlikely scenario whereby Perikatan somehow manages to win control of the Selangor state government, or if let's say PH manages to retain Selangor, but both PH and PN wins less than 30% of the Malay vote combined, I think this would may precipitate a series of events which will begin with the 10 or so MPs who are not aligned to Zahid Hamidi to resign from their seats, and then to trigger a by-election in the near term. And this may take place together with the Kulai by-election after the recent passing away of Salahuddin Ayub. And I think this is also important, in terms of these candidates likely will be almost certain to contest again under the PN banner. So these will be people like Hishamuddin Tun Hussein, and maybe even some of the other Johor leaders as well who are not aligned to Zahid Hamidi. And if PN manages to win almost all of these seats, they will have the majority of seats in Peninsular Malaysia. And this may trigger a political alignment whereby Sabah and Sarawak parties may want to realign and form a new government together with Perikatan Nasional. Fresh elections may still be possible if, let's say, there's an impasse. But I think the formation of a PN-led government is probably more likely compared to fresh elections. This will be, of course, very destabilizing for the politics of the country, for the business community, for investors, and also for the sentiment on the ringgit as well. It is not likely to happen, but the small possibility is there. So with that, I'd like to stop and pass it on back to Francis. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kian Ming. It went over a little bit, but it was so interesting that I didn't have the heart to come in and say, please wrap up now. So we hand over to Marzuki, and if you want to take perhaps a little 2 or 3 minutes at the end, go to perhaps 18 minutes or so, that's fine. And then perhaps we adjust elsewhere in the event. So Marzuki, if we can now pass over to you.
Okay, thank you, Francis. Let me share my screen first. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, but if you can put it in slide format or presentation format.
Yeah, okay, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Francis, and a very good morning to everybody. My good friend, Kian Wing. I enjoy your presentation just now. It's very informative, and I will have some questions later. So what I'll do today is to explain or to present the findings of a survey that I've done with Institute Masa Depan Malaysia. This is a post GE15 survey that we have done in March and April this year. Talking about the methodology and the respondent file, we have done a survey of 1,200 multi-ethnic respondents representing voters in 39 Malay majority seats in the state of Selangor. But the focus of my analysis will be on the 850 Malay respondents. We used a random stratified sampling method and face-to-face interview where the margin of error is about 3.36% at 95% confidence level, and about 4.42% at 99% confidence level. And as I said, this survey was conducted from the 1st of March to 20th of April 2023. You look at it, gender, it more or less reflects the gender composition of voters in the 39 Malay majority state seats in Selangor, with 55% male respondents and 45% female respondents. In terms of rural-urban divide, we have 24% respondents from the rural areas, 35% from urban areas, and 41% from semi-urban areas. And if you can see, in terms of income group, age, education, and occupation, it more or less reflects the voter demography. We asked the question of about the direction of the country as well as direction of Selangor. We found this quite common in all other surveys, where the direction of the state is normally better than of the country at the national level. Where you can see here, people perceive the state of Selangor more positively at 54%, compared to the direction of the country at 48%. In terms of the main issues and problems, we asked a question of what are the most important issues to the voters. We asked them to state 2 issues. The first one, the most important issues to them, you can see down here, is inflation, the cost of living. Like Kian Wing mentioned in one of these slides, these are the focus of issues that will probably be highlighted during the campaign period. Inflation, cost of living is about 60% of respondents said that this is the most important issues to them, where other issues like corruption, political instability, ethnic and racial rights, is not that much prominent. And you can see the second most important issues to them is still related to bread and butter, like welfare, economic development, inflation. So these are also related to economy and bread and butter issue. And we asked them how satisfied are they with the way the government handles or try to solve these issues. We can see here that only about 20% of them said they are satisfied, while large majority of them say they are not satisfied. And the government approval rating, satisfaction towards the federal government led by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, you can see here about 44% said they are satisfied, whereas about 40% are not satisfied and the rest are quite unsure. This is something that we need to ponder, because normally when the incumbent government goes into election, it's good if they have a very high approval rating, because this will create a feel-good factor. But by looking at this approval rating, I don't see any feel-good factor for the incumbent government going into the election. Satisfaction with political leaders across parties, like Kian Wing has quoted in his presentation just now. For Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, among how the Malay voters in Selangor perceive him, is about 43%. Says that they are satisfied, compared with Tan Sri Muhyiddin at 60%. Hadi come third at 27%. Sorry, at 30%. Whereas Zahid Hamidi is the lowest, is about 17%. Kian Wing, they make a comment just now that, yeah, I agree that the Malay's approval rating for Anwar did increase compared to before the election. But I expect, as a Prime Minister, as a sitting Prime Minister, his approval rating should be more than 50% among the Malay voters, especially in the state of Selangor, where Selangor is the home base of PKR. The voting factors, we asked the voters what are the factors which are most important to them or most prominent, in influencing their voting behavior. About 37% said it's party. So we can say that party identification is still quite high. compared to other factors like candidates quality comes second, but still very important. So party and candidates quality will play a very important role. As Kian Wing said just now, parties has just declared their announced their candidates. PN will probably announce the candidates maybe tomorrow or the day after. So we can see while parties can benefit from the party's image, because voters still feel that the party play a very important role in influencing their voting behavior, but don't forget about candidates' quality. So like Kian Wing said, I agree with him that candidates' quality in terms of their professional background, young candidates and so on and so forth is very important. But we also know that managing that is not easy, because the reality on the ground that you still have to deal with, the party structure, the local sentiment, the member sentiment, and not to mention about the warlord culture, which I think is still the prevalent in any political parties taking part in the election. So other factor like local candidate is very important, 12%. MB candidate is not that prominent, but only 6% says that mentioning or announcing MB candidate would be helpful in deciding their voting behavior for party choice. A voting inclination, if it is a multi-corner, this is a multi-corner scenario. About 16% of the respondents say that they will vote for Barisan Nasional, 22% said they will vote for Pakatan Harapan, and about 33% said they will vote for Perikatan Nasional. So here we can see that PN is actually leading on the Malay front, with about 25% of Malay voters say that their vote is still secret. My hunch is they have decided, most of them have decided, but they don't want to reveal which party that they will vote for. And 25% is quite consistent with our surveys before GE15, whereas in my survey, we found that almost about 30% said that they are still unsure. But in fact, they have decided, they have made up their mind, but they just don't want to reveal their party choice. Now, in the two-cornered contest between Perikatan Nasional and Pakatan Harapan, and you can see that the slight increase for Perikatan Nasional from 33% to 40%, which means there is no 100% vote transferability between Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional. So we'll see later on that some of these votes come from BN voters, right? Where PH, those voters, respondents who said that they will vote for PH about 28%, and there are about 32% still quite unsure at that point of in that point of time. In a two-cornered contest between PN and Barisan Nasional, it's actually slightly better for Perikatan Nasional, where 42% said they will vote for PN, where only 21% said they will vote for Barisan Nasional, and those who fall into the unsure voter category has increased to about 37%. So my gut feeling is that the data will let us show that in a two-cornered contest between PN and BN, there is a potential that some of the PH voters in the last election will or may vote for Perikatan Nasional instead of Barisan Nasional. So we see here vote transferability. You can see here is the graph here is for BN voters in G15. So we asked them in the contest between PN and PH, which party that they will vote, whether they will vote for Perikatan Nasional or vote for Pakatan Harapan. You can see here about 39% of BN voters, in the last general election vote for Perikatan Nasional, where only 15% said that they will vote for Pakatan Harapan, and about 46% are still quite unsure, or they just don't want to reveal their party choice at that moment. And then the supporters of PH is quite solid here. About 85% will still vote for Pakatan Harapan, with about 5% say that they will swing their vote to Perikatan Nasional. About 10% is quite unsure. Similarly, the PN voters are also quite solid, with 87% say they will still vote for Perikatan Nasional. But there's some here, about 6.5% said they will vote for Pakatan Harapan, with 6.5% here still unsure. And the unsure voters in GE15 quite equally divided here, with 14% said they will vote for PN, and 19% said they will vote for Pakatan Harapan, and about 67%, still large percentage here, who are still unsure. Yeah, so I think the campaign narrative is very important for these unsure voters. While in Perikatan Nasional versus Barisan Nasional scenario, you can see that for BN voters, the percentage who will vote for BN is about half of that. It's about half will still vote for BN, but about 20% will transfer to or swing vote to BN, with 28% is quite unsure. For PH here, you can see here about 29% of Malay PN voters will vote for Perikatan Nasional, and they won't transfer their vote to Barisan Nasional. Only 24% said they will vote for Barisan Nasional, where 47% are still unsure at that moment. PN vote is still very solid here, with 88%, with 3% says they will vote for Barisan Nasional, and 9% are unsure. Whereas the unsure voters, they are equally divided, between two parties, with quite high percentage of them are still unsure in that point of time. So, so my conclusion would be that the Selangor state election will not be like a walk in the park for PH or for PN or for BN. It will be quite competitive, or very competitive in some areas. Why? Because we found that there is no full vote transferability between Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional. A simple calculation of the last general election, like Kian Wing has mentioned in his paper, that it is like an easy win for Pakatan Harapan if 1 + 1 = 2. Meaning, if you combine Barisan Nasional and Pakatan Harapan votes in the last general election, then it means full vote transferability. Then Pakatan Harapan can win Selangor state election very easily. But because there is no 100% vote transferability between Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional, and there is an indication that there will be vote swing towards Perikatan Nasional, then it raises a question whether Pakatan Harapan can still retain the Selangor state government after the election. So it is a question. It is a question which means that the state election will be quite competitive. I must say that PN is leading on the Malay front, but PH is also leading on the non-Malay front. So PH is expected to be quite safe in the 17 non-Malay majority seats, whereas PN will have an added advantage in at least 15 large Malay majority seats. Normally, these are the seats in the coastal area, the northern part of Selangor, from Sabak Bernam to probably to Kuala Langat. So these are the areas where PN can be quite comfortable there. So I expect that there will be a fierce contest. The election will be very competitive in the rest of 24 Malay majority seats. So that's my presentation for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marzuki. And then perhaps if you would like to take a few minutes to ask some questions of Kian Wing before we then turn to Kian Wing for his response and perhaps some of his additional questions.
Yes, I would like to ask Kian Wing about this. Yes, you did mention about my survey finding where you said that if Pakatan Harapan and BN can get about 30% votes transferable to either party, either 30% from BN to PH, or either way, then PHBN can win quite comfortably in the state election. But my question is this: that 30% is not equally distributed. It's not equally distributed across state constituencies. In some areas, this is an average. In some areas it could be more than 30%. In some areas it could be less than 30%. So, whether Kian Wing has done any state, specific or state seat specific survey, to test whether the vote transferability rate is higher than the state average or lower than state average in those constituencies.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Excellent question. Short answer would be no, I've not done seat by seat analysis. But what I do suspect, from what I've seen on the ground, especially in areas that I'm familiar with, would be the vote transferability between BN and PH, from BN to PH, would be higher where there was already good ground made in terms of reaching out to the local leaders by, let's say, PH leaders reaching out to BN leaders. So I can give an example. In the state seat of Sungai Ramal, that is in Bandar Baru Bangi, that is an important state seat where the majority, using the GE15 results, PAS actually won this seat, this state seat. But of course, that was against a DAP candidate contesting at the parliamentary level. So in this particular state seat, the efforts by PH to reach out to the grassroots and also to the leaders of UMNO had already been going on for quite some time already. At the launch of the Bilik Gerakan in Sungai Ramal a couple of days ago, where I was in attendance, the Ketua Bahagian, Dr. Zain, he was present, and together with the rest of his friends as well. And in contrast, in a seat like Dusun Tua, for example, where UMNO is contesting and DAP the seat was taken away from the DAP, there's not been any sort of like outreach by UMNO to at least my party, to the grassroots in my party. And I think in those kinds of circumstances, because of weak sort of like campaigning strength between PH and BN, the vote transferability between PH to BN would be lower. It may even be lower than the 80% that I projected just now. So there are a lot of these kinds of local dynamics which we would not know until we go down to the ground. And I'm glad to hear that ISEAS is sending out the one of its top scholars, Dr. Lee Hock An, to go down to the campaign trail. I may join him as well. Maybe we can go, all three of us can go to some of the places in Sabak Bernam and Sekinchan to have a look, to see the kind of vote transferability. And I think Dr. Marzuki rightly pointed out that in places like Sabak Bernam, where No Omar and also PN is very strong, the vote transferability between BN and PH would be probably quite low, because of the strength of Perikatan Nasional in places like this. So it really depends on the constituency in question.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Perhaps it might be good if we group the questions. Marzuki, did you have any other questions, or was that your main question for Kian Wing?
Yeah, that's my main question. That's all.
Okay, perfect. So then, Kian Wing, perhaps now you may like to, you've already responded. Do you have any questions perhaps to ask Marzuki at this juncture?
Yeah, actually, I have three questions that I've written down. First one, you mentioned that the MB candidate, the Menteri Besar candidate, did not feature that prominently in your survey. But I think it's something that will be an issue on the campaign trail, especially since we know that for Perikatan Nasional, there are two likely candidates. One is the former Menteri Besar, Azmin Ali, and another likely candidate would be Razi Jidin, the former Education Minister and current MP for Putrajaya. Both have their strengths and weaknesses, which I'm sure we can elaborate on later on. But how important do you think is the strategy of naming a Menteri Besar candidate for Perikatan Nasional? And what, in your opinion, are the strengths and weaknesses of these two possible MB candidates? Second question is relating to the domino effect that I talked about just now, the black swan and then the domino effect. How likely do you think that is going to happen? And if that happens, how will it affect the stability of the country from a political and economic standpoint? And then thirdly, I'm glad that we're having this civilized dialogue, but we know that in politics, this kind of dialogue is the minority rather than the majority, and the issues of 3R will continue to be played up by all sides, by Perikatan, by some of the leaders within my own party even, to sort of like, try to rile up the base and get the base excited, so to speak. What do you think we as scholars can do, and also scholars who are, active in the political arena in our own respective spheres? What do you think we can do to help shift the political rhetoric and campaigning in this country from more 3R to perhaps more to policy discussions, the bread and butter issues that I think affect the man on the street much more than some of these culture wars that we're seeing in the country? Yeah, so these three questions.
Thank you very much. Very good questions, please.
Right. Thank you very much, Kian Wing. On the MB candidate, yeah. Yes, our survey found that it is not quite, a prominent issue that people want to see who will be the MB candidate. But I don't discount the fact that maybe in the middle of the election campaign that people will ask, who will be your MB candidate. What PN has is a list of potential, a list of potential MB candidates, that even if Perikatan Nasional win the state, that we are not lacking of someone who is capable, someone who is experienced, to lead the state. Between Razi Jidin and Azmin, I'm not sure whether Dr. Razi will contest in the election. He's a Kelantanese. So I'm not too sure about it, but we'll see tomorrow.
Marzuki, a lot of Kelantanese in Bangi, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Kelantanese too. Can I contest there? Yeah. Anyway, but you mentioned about the Datuk Seri Azmin. Of course, he's a former Menteri Besar of Selangor. He's a former Minister of Trade Industry. Your minister before this. And then I think he has got experience, as an MB, and he knows probably how to manage the state. And he's done quite a good job when he was the Menteri Besar. A lot of programs or initiatives to help the people, especially the poor and the low-income groups, has been implemented during his tenure as the Menteri Besar of Selangor. So I think he has the credential, but we leave it to the where in the state election, it is the Sultan basically who will have the say in who will become the Menteri Besar after the election. But of course, he will be one of the leading candidate from Perikatan Nasional, I guess. And then whether the domino effect will happen after the state election. Well, people are talking about it, but I think it is too early to say about it, so let's we cross the bridge when we come to it, whether there will be change of government at the federal level or not is something that we have to see after the federal election. I think now, because of the the anti-party hopping law, is something that we have to take into account. And then the people's sentiment is also important after the election. What is the general sentiment of the public after the election? I think will also figure very predominantly whether there will be change of of government or not. I don't want to speculate on that, but people are saying that this state election will be like a referendum on the federal government, which to a certain extent, by looking at the sentiment on the ground, I think that will be the case, because as you see from the survey just now, most important issues are not state-related issues. The most important issues to the people is about cost of living, is about economy, is about the country's economy, about the personal income, which basically it comes under the purview of the federal government. It is not the state government, economy, finance, cost of living, consumer affairs, for example. It comes under the authority of the federal government. So if people are not happy with the economy, that they will show their sentiment in this state election, and it will mostly be, I think, it is like a referendum on the federal government rather than the state government. About the 3R issue, what is the role of the academics? Well, I think this is very important because as you can see from even from the survey, racial and religious issue, it does not figure very prominent. It's about 3% of them say that this is important to them. Most important to them is economy. It is about bread and butter. It is not about race. It is not about religion. But somehow in Malaysian politics, race and religion is something that is always at the back of their minds. So I think this is quite, something that you don't have to say. Something that you don't have to really, make it like a propaganda, because it's already there in their mind. Like I used to say that in the last general election, why 95% of the Chinese voters, they voted for Pakatan Harapan? Is it not something to do with race? I think it's something to do with race. And why more than more than 85% of Malay voters in the GE15 did not vote for Pakatan Harapan? Is it not something to do with race? I think it does. It relates to race. It is there, but you don't have to, like a sleeping tiger, so you don't have to wake him up. You don't have to do something to wake the tiger up, I think we don't have to be so hard. We don't have to to rationalize the election, so let the people decide, and they know whether Malays or Chinese or Indians, they know which party that can serve them better, so we just leave it at that, so that will be my my response to Kian Wing.
Okay. Kian Wing, okay, good. So then now we'll move into the second part, where we have questions and answers from the audience. So please, we do have the function below, the Q&A function, not the chat function. Please put your questions there. I'll just begin with two that came in from Nazreen Zachariah. So the first one, I guess, is more to Kian Wing, just in terms of someone that is sort of immersed in the Selangor political context. Any comment on Tengku Safrul not being a candidate in the state lineup? And then the second one, I guess, for both of our speakers, how do you anticipate the impact of MUDA to be as a third force in many ways, kind of coming at a lot of issues, perhaps in a way that is compatible with Pakatan Harapan's mindset, and that basically could constitute eating into voter share in some select seats? So how could this, in terms of the number of seats won by either camp, have an effect? So Kian Wing first for the first question, and then both speakers for the second.
Yeah. First question on Zafrul. I think the fact that Zafrul wasn't nominated by his party, UMNO, actually points to a larger structural problem within UMNO, which is the fact that somebody like Zafrul, who clearly has national as well as state popularity, given his background and also given his I think quite decent performance as the former Minister of Finance during the COVID period, he would have been an asset not just for UMNO but also for Pakatan Harapan for the campaign in Selangor. And this has been widely speculated and also discussed by people like Khairul and Sharul Hamdan on their podcast, whereby they said that, and I think with great accuracy, that Zafrul was actually blocked by the state chief of UMNO, Dato' Megat, because Dato' Megat did not want the situation where Zafrul may win a seat and then he will get a position that is senior or head of Megat. That's one. Second thing is, I think also the fact that Zahid Hamidi himself did not push for Zafrul to contest in a state in Selangor also shows, I think, the kind of challenges that somebody like Zafrul, and also others who may be, quite popular within the larger public, would find, in terms of wanting to get a head in UMNO and get a position of prominence. And then finally, I'd just like to throw it out there. Of course, this all could have been overridden, by the Prime Minister himself. If Anwar had said, look, I think Zafrul will be an asset to not just UMNO, but also PH in the campaign in Selangor, we should nominate him, but that didn't happen. And it could be because Anwar himself is afraid that perhaps somewhere along the line, if let's say, Zafrul wins and then he is seen as somebody that is favorable MB candidate by the palace, then he may be nominated above a PKR, over and above a PKR candidate, and that will create problems with Anwar as well. So that's my response. Personally, I'm a bit disappointed because I think Zafrul, I've seen him in action before. I would have liked to see him as a candidate in Selangor, and it would have been definitely an exciting contribution to the campaign trail. And on the second issue of Muda, I would say that again, it's constituency and also candidate specific. I think on the whole, I would say that Muda candidates will make a lot of waves in terms of getting out there on social media and being part and parcel of the media narrative. But in terms of actual votes itself, I don't really think that they will be able to, make much of an impact. Maybe in some of the marginal seats, they may be able to take away enough votes such that it may make a difference. I'm not sure whether it will be taking away votes from PH or PN, but these are relatively, not that many seats. I would think of one, let's say Kuala Kubu Baru, in Hulu Langat, in Hulu Selangor as one of those marginal seats, a DAP seat that a candidate like Muda may affect a little bit more than others. But in a seat like, let's say, Bandar Utama, that's a very strong DAP seat, I don't think the Muda candidate there would make much of a difference. So, but it's good to have that kind of third force narrative. And like I said before, Muda is playing the long game, and I think it's good for democracy in the country.
Thanks. Marzuki, perhaps any reaction to Muda? You're on mute.
Yes, on Muda, yes, I concur with Kian Wing that I mean, for the party, it may not probably it may not give an impact on the party itself. On the Muda, for example, to gain votes, for the party to win in the election. But in a very competitive election like this, it will have some impact on the other party, whether Muda will take a vote from PH or will take vote from PN. I mean, that even when in the competitive election where even one vote matter. So we can't look at Muda's participation in this election too lightly. It will have some impact on the ground, I believe.
Okay, we have a question from Aira Azhari. So there's one question each. So for Kian Wing, they would like to know what is the reasoning behind DAP letting go of Dusun Tua, DAP's only Malay majority seat, to UMNO, and how has the reaction been, or what has been the reaction been at the grassroots level? And then to Marzuki, the surveys that you talked about, as well as more generally, really, very much stress the role and the importance of the cost of living and inflation as a key issue. But many of these things are external, they're structural and not solvable in the short run. So, even if PN takes over, and then here we come back into the whole issue of really discussing about policy issues, how can PN convince voters that they can do a better job at solving these issues, especially in the short term? So Kian Wing first, and then Marzuki.
Yeah, quickly, I think the news of Dusun Tua being taken away from DAP and giving to UMNO was a big shock, not just to the local members, but also to many of our members outside Dusun Tour as well. It was it is not the only Malay majority seat that DAP won in. Sungai Pelek is another Malay majority seat that we won in. But it is the only Malay majority seat where a Malay DAP candidate won. Right. So we in the lineup that was announced yesterday by the Secretary General, we have now only 1 out of 15 Malay candidate. That's Jamalia in Bandar Utama, which is a Chinese majority state seat. So I think this definitely is a blow to the DAP, because we want to be more inclusive. We want to have more Malay candidates being fielded. But I think the rationale of this was, PKR gave out 1 seat to UMNO in Gombak Setia. So I think the understanding or the thinking maybe behind PM Anwar was that DAP should also give up 1 seat, and so happened that the head of the division in Hulu Langat is a close associate of Zahid Hamidi, the president of UMNO, and I think he really pulled out a lot of stops to ensure that his guy on the ground gets an additional seat. Whether or not this translates into a win for UMNO, I think the script remains to be written, and I think it's going to be a tough fight in this particular seat for the UMNO candidate.
Thank you, Marzuki.
Yes, about the issue of cost of living. I believe that ordinary Malaysians, they understand that this is not an easy issue to solve, because there are a lot of external factors involved in the issue of pricing of goods, some disruption of supply, not at the local level, but it is global disruption of supply that the government is, that the country is facing. The issue about the depreciation of ringgit, it is global rather than local. There are some issues that the government here more on the part of the federal government than the state government that would be in the position to handle it. But having said that, it is not hopeless. It is not entirely hopeless. It's not something that the government can't do to ease the burden. You can't solve the issue in one go, but there are ways how to ease the burden. For example, probably there's for rich state, for example, like Selangor, can the state, implement some kind of cash transfer program, for example, in order just to ease the burden at this moment for a certain period of time. And to address cost of living, I think this will come up in the manifesto. Once the manifesto is reviewed, then we know what are the steps that will be taken by Perikatan Nasional once the party wins the state. So let's wait until that. I'm not saying that it is not solvable at all. Of course, you can't solve it in one go, but there are ways and means of how to ease the burden of the people.
Yeah, Francis, can I just add a little bit on?
Yes,
to that.
please.
Yeah, and I think this is where the governing narrative actually matters a bit, and I think this is where perhaps PH at the state government level hasn't done enough to publicize some of the policy initiatives. So, for example, the menu Rahmat that was promoted so aggressively by the late Salahuddin Ayub, Minister for Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, was actually an idea that was started in Selangor. We have these, Jelajah Rahmat, these sales of very basic food items, chicken, eggs, cooking oil, sold at subsidized prices, subsidized by the Selangor state government in many of the low-cost housing areas. When I was MP, I went down to the ground with the ADUNs as well in each of these areas to look at the reception of these sales, and it was actually very popular. And there were a number of other related policy issues that were also rolled out, including, for example, providing sort of like a low-cost insurance policies for the B40 community. So all these things are actually, part and parcel of the state government initiatives. Of course, Azmin Ali was also part and parcel of that ecosystem when he was Menteri Besar. So I think this is it's important to note that we need to have this kind of policy continuity and discussions so that we don't focus so much on the 3 Rs, and then we focus on things that really matter to the people, like the cost of living issues that we've been discussing this seminar.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Kian Ming. We have a very interesting question from Noor Sharil, our colleague here at ISEAS, and I'll ask that first of Marzuki and then of Kian Ming. How do you see the impact of the Mahathir Muhyiddin reconciliation and now this sort of new rapprochement between Mahathir and past leaders? And how do you think this can be perceived in an urbanized state such as Selangor? So if I can ask Marzuki first and then Kian.
Thanks, Dr. Mashavir, for this question. How do I see Mahathir and Muhyiddin reconciliation? In the context of state election, particularly in Selangor, this would mean something because in the last general election, there are few places where Pejuang contested, and they garnered quite quite a number of votes. In some places, more than 1,000 or even close to 2,000 votes in that particular area. So in the very highly competitive election like this, where one vote matters, I think this kind of reconciliation probably will help, Perikatan Nasional to win those Pejuang votes, for example, So other than that, I think at the national level, this is something that the party members in particular, they welcome this very much. Because, there is just a brief period of what we call these disagreements between the two figures, but generally I would say that they respect each other, like I know Tan Sri Muhyiddin, he respects Tun Mahathir very much, and I think Tun Mahathir too have some kind of respect to Tan Sri Muhyiddin. And I think the reconciliation is not something that is very difficult to achieve. Once everybody knows the reality, the situation that they are in, and the future for the country and for the party and for the Malays in particular. Then they are willing to set aside their differences and come together to work together for the country and for the Malays.
Okay, thank you. Any comment on that?
Yeah, I will respond by not necessarily pointing out or looking at the political impact of Mahathir, reconciling with past as well as Perikatan leaders. I think I'd like to point out the larger challenge that Malaysia faces, which is the issue of the politics of animosity, long-standing animosity. And we all know that one of the main reasons why Dr. Mahathir has done what he has done lately, including this reconciliation, is because he wants to attack Anwar Ibrahim. This long-standing sort of like enmity between these two men, and I think this is not healthy for Malaysian politics. And I would also like to say that it is not healthy when the instruments of power of the state, such as the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, is being used by those in power to prosecute and to persecute those who are out of power. One of the first statements that I issued after Anwar Ibrahim became Prime Minister was to ask for this politics of demonization to stop. And I think, sadly, that has not been the case. We see Perikatan leaders being, charged, rightly or wrongly, by MECC. And I think the kind of practice that this encourages is that if, let's say, the Black Swan event happens, the Domino Theory falls, the dominoes fall, and Perikatan Nasional comes back into power, I am quite sure that, barring any very unusual circumstances, the same instruments of power, MECC, would be used against some of the leaders in Pakatan Harapan and also in Barisan Nasional. Right? So I think this kind of tit-for-tat politics, this kind of politics of animosity and personality-driven politics should be minimized in the Malaysian context so that we can focus on the kind of bread and butter issues that really helps the people, including and especially the majority population, the Malay community in this country. Mahathir coming together with Anwar, with Muhyiddin, is not going to help resolve some of these bread and butter issues that we talk about just now. In fact, it may even make it worse for different reasons.
Okay, thank you. So we have two very nice questions that have come in from Lee Hock An, our colleague here at ISEAS. And so the first one, I guess, is a bit more towards Kian Ming, and then the second, I think, very much is for both speakers. So the first one is on the absence of MCA and MIC candidates. Will this have an impact on BN morale and turnout in an election that can be decided by narrow margins? But certainly, I think also, Marzuki, if you have anything to add there, we're happy to hear. Then the second question is, this whole recent discussion about the statements of the Menteri Besar of Kedah, Sanusi, and, the whole discussion of the role of the Selangor Sultan and whether, appropriate levels of respect were maintained. And what is the likely effect here to be? So perhaps if I can invite Kian Ming to go first on the BN question.
Okay. The impact of MCA and MIC, I think, is relatively minimal in the state of Selangor. And the main reason is because given the fact that MCA and MIC and BN has been out of power in the state for, since 2008, 3 election cycles, I can say for experience that their grassroots is actually decimated. So, with or without their presence, I don't really think they would make much of a difference to BN's campaign. And to re-emphasize what I said just now, it is actually more important for BN candidates, as UMNO candidates in this case, to engage with DAP, with PKR, with Amanah, because we are in a much better position to be able to help them win the support of of voters that many of my former colleagues have served. On the ground, many of the Ali Majlis have reached out to and have a very good relationship with on the ground and things like that. So, the focus actually should be on PH, BN reaching out to PH rather than to be dependent on MCA and MIC, which are no longer politically relevant, I think, in the state. Second question with regards to Sanusi and his recent remarks. I would say this. Not in context of what he said about the Sultan of Selangor, which is being investigated now and he's been charged. I would say that the kind of strategy that Sanusi is using is maybe a little bit similar to what some of my my DAP leaders are also doing at the national level, which is basically to sort of like whip up sentiment and support among their own base. So in Sanusi's case, it would be among the sort of like a mass Malay community who wants to see a Malay hero emerge to be able to take on certain issues, take on certain people in ways that others, who are maybe a little bit more gentlemanly, like Marzuki or like Tan Sri Muhyiddin, would not want to see themselves, have that kind of image. So I think Sanusi is very effective, and we cannot discount his effectiveness in the campaign. Maybe less so in Selangor, but definitely in Kedah, definitely in Penang, he would be a very effective campaigner.
Thank you. Marzuki?
Yes, on Sanusi. Well, I'm not commenting on what he said, like Kian Ming also said just now, because the case is being, it is a court case now. And what I'm trying to see is what's the response on the ground. I've been following the social media response on the TikToks and mostly on TikToks and FB. Well, I see that the support for Sanusi has increased, because of that persecution against him. So he's like a Malay folk hero now, particularly in his home state of Kedah, is it? So I'm not too sure how it will have an impact on the state election outside Kedah, because he's very popular in Kedah, and he also got some traction in the state of Selangor. People, sympathize with him when he was prosecuted in the court of law. So this is something that we have to see how it will have an impact on the outcome of the election. Yeah, that's my response to it.
Okay, thank you. And so we have a nice question from Nawaljeet Singh. And so the question really pertains to how do we understand the victory. So let's say, we have status quo, so the three northern states are retained by Perikatan Nasional, and then we begin to see an incursion by Perikatan Nasional into Malay majority constituencies in Penang, in Negeri Sembilan, and of course Selangor. Is this a green wave? Now I know, Kian Ming, you've written about this, Khairi Jamaluddin has written about this, but let's say we see a geographical expansion of this, and if you like, a consolidation of areas under Perikatan Nasional. What is the meaning we should give this development if it happens like this? So Kian Ming first, and then Marzuki.
Yeah, I'll jump straight in and I'll say these are some of the weaknesses that are facing Pakatan Harapan. And they have nothing to do with religion or the green wave or the so-called green wave. I think firstly, PH has been lacking in terms of a coherent national governing narrative. And I think on this part, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim probably can do more in terms of decreasing his rhetoric in attacking some of his political opponents and focusing more of his time on announcing new policies, some of which are actually pretty good. So, for example, there's been a new announcement on a special investors pass for people who are, and companies and people who want to invest, in Malaysia for the long term. That should be something that we should play up and say that this is the new Malaysia under the Madani government of being more inviting. But unfortunately, I think more of the time has been spent on attacking political opponents and going after old ground that contributes to the lack of a political narrative. I think secondly, we have a challenge whereby people in PH, including from my own party, have also been saying statements that gives ammunition to the other side. So, for example, saying that if Perikatan Nasional comes to power, they will demolish temples or Indian temples, and that kind of fear-mongering tactic has been and will continue to be used by Perikatan Nasional and also their sympathizers to attack Pakatan Harapan. And thirdly, I think what PH and BN is not helped by is the fact that I think Zahid Hamidi is seen as a very weak leader among the Malay community, and his selection of candidates in Selangor for UMNO probably accentuates this fact. And all these reasons are reasons why I think Perikatan Nasional has an advantage in terms of being able to secure more Malay votes, but they have nothing to do with religion or the green.
Yeah. To me, there is no green wave. If there is any wave, there's a blue wave of Perikatan Nasional. But if we notice that the word green wave was first created by Lim Kit Siang, in one of his articles way back after the GE15. So what I see, this is just a tactical move by some within Kian Meng's party, just to instill fear probably among the Chinese voters that don't vote for Perikatan Nasional. If you vote for Perikatan Nasional, then PAS will come to power. So this is 3R. This is part of the 3R issue in particular. So it is a green wave is just a kind of, to me, it's a propaganda in order to make sure that the support, the non-Malay or the Chinese voter support for Pakatan Harapan will remain intact going into the state election. And it was amplified by Lim Guan Eng's in a statement in Penang sometime, I think probably a few weeks ago, that if PAS comes to power, then all the Chinese temples will be demolitions and so forth. But PAS was also quite quick in coming up with a response that, let's see, the biggest sleeping Buddha and the sitting Buddha were in Kelantan. They have been there for decades. It has not been demolished. And I've seen some videos people are doing on it to say that the temples will not be. And in fact, there's a fact that they were never demolished, like in the state of Kelantan, which has been under past rule since 1990. So I think this is just part of a political communication strategy in the ethnically divided society, where you want to make sure that your supporters remain intact. Then you use this religious kind of fear mongering just to deter your voters from swinging to the other side. So that's my take. To me, there is no such thing as green wave. If there is any wave, there's a blue wave of Perikatan Nasional.
Yeah, Francis, just to add on a little bit to that, firstly, clarification point. Lim Guan Eng didn't say the demolishment of Chinese temples. He made reference to a temple, or the Indian temple, one Indian temple that was demolished in Kedah. But I think the larger point of his speech, if you read it in full, I think you can see where he was coming from. It's not something that I agree with, but it has been said, and it's also a case that's being investigated now. I think the larger point I want to make is this: politicians from all sides will have the natural instinct to want to appeal to the baser instincts of their supporters, whether it's from PH, BN, or PN. And I think we need politicians who can rise above that, to be able to tell the public, to be able to speak in ceramahs, to be able to use their social media to communicate the real issues and the real challenges that the country are facing, whether it's from an economic perspective, whether it's from a cost of living perspective, foreign direct investment, the fall of the ringgit, and things like that. So without that kind of honest communication that is based on substantive facts and policies, our country will always be stuck in this 3R rhetoric that all sides will use as their baser instinct, and then we cannot move to the middle ground. But I'm glad that there are people like Marzuki around. I'm glad there are people like Liu Chintong from my party around, people like Anthony Loke, people like the late Saluddin Ayub, many of my friends in Bersatu, as well as in past, Takayuddin Hassan, Saifuddin Abdullah. All these are people who can represent the moderate ground much better. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure what is the reason. Somehow we've not been able to coalesce together and reach out across the aisle to be able to work together on issues of mutual interest. And I think this is part and parcel of the larger tragedy in Malaysian politics.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we're beginning to run out of time, so we'll have a last question. Apologies that we could not get through all questions today. And this question is from Richard Yo. And I'll rephrase it slightly, and I'll bring it back to the issue of Black Swan event and dominoes tipping. So in the event, or I guess what could lead the domino to tip over and begin hitting other dominoes? So let's say, if PHBN actually lose Negeri Sembilan, would that have much of an impact? Or is it really only about Selangor? And if it's Selangor, how much does it have to be lost by? Would it have to be a complete wipeout of the unity government? Or what if they, lose a lot of ground but still remain in power? Or if they lose narrowly? So I know this is not very scientific. We get into the realm of sort of, gut feelings, but I think this is useful as we look forward to try and kind of gauge what constitutes success and failure for each coalition. So yes, when do we think the domino could tip? Perhaps if I can invite Marzuki to answer first, and then Kian.
Well, as I said, people are talking about it, but we can be very sure, whether that domino will happen or not, because it is a different kind of context, altogether. You have to look into its practicality, for example, of how it will happen. So well, of course, there will be some grouses. Say, for example, if UMNO suffered crushing defeat in the election by failing to win any seats in Kedah or any seats in Kelantan or in Terengganu, or lose, many of its seats that it contested in Selangor or Negeri Sembilan, So whether there will be some kind of, revolt within the UMNO itself, for example, against the leadership. It's something that we have to see whether it will happen or not. Some of my friends say no, because UMNO is now like a zombie, is it? It has lost its soul, and so whether this kind of revolt within the party will happen, like it happened in the past when party suffered a crushing defeat, for example. Then there are some move, to change the leadership. But whether this time round will this happen in UMNO, right? So, or they still think that be part of the government is more important rather than winning the election. So this is some very big question to ask, whether if that is the case, whether the domino effect will really happen or not. So I don't want to speculate, because there are so many variables that we have to see after the election. As you said, we cannot be too scientific on this. Politics is more an art rather than a science. So I would rather take a position to wait and see rather than to speculate. Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that we have a couple of political scientists here, trying to talk about the science of politics and the art of politics. I'll respond in two ways to that question. I think firstly, the larger narrative of going back to the title of this webinar, sort of like the hearts and the minds. And the narrative is who has the hearts and the minds of the majority population, of the Malay population in this country, who has their support. And this is, I think, in a nutshell, what will be the narrative for the outcome of this state elections. If the narrative is such that, this wave or this sense of dissatisfaction with PH and BN is so strong that PN is able to even win Negeri Sembilan, for example, which I think even Marzuki would agree not as likely as PN winning Selangor. But if that happens, then I would say that the narrative is a very, very strong one to say that PN has a very strong support among the Malay community in Peninsular Malaysia. And because of that, it will be very, very difficult for all the powers that be to continue to support PH-led government under the unity government. So, in terms of, the domino effects and all that, I've said it, I've just given enough details already. But what I want to emphasize now is that it is not too late for us to try to stop these dominoes from falling. And not just because I don't think, I think it's, wrong for the other side, like Perikatan, to come into power. I think, they have as legitimate a right to power as any other coalition, especially if it's won through elections, fair and proper. I think I'm more concerned about the kind of political and economic instability that will bring to the country, perhaps in a way that is much more longer term than many politicians can understand and realize. Because this will tell foreign investors that, look, we don't know when this government will fall. We don't know how long it will last. And it doesn't matter whether it's Perikatan in power or PH is in power. Even if you have a 2/3 majority, things can happen such that the government can fall within the matter of months. So how are we going to invest in this country? How are we going to bring back our US dollars to put into ringgit? How are we going to invest in the people of this country for the long term? Right? This is actually my bigger concern. And I hope that the powers that be, all the politicians, as many of them as possible, can put aside their own narrow self-interest and focus on the issues that are more important to the country's stability from economic and political perspective.
Okay, so now regrettably we have run out of time. So before I conclude, please bear with me as I make one announcement. So our state polls are on the 12th of August. Soon we will be sending out a seminar notice on the 10th of August. You're invited to join us here again virtually when, as Kian Wing mentioned, members of our team, the Malaysia Studies Programme team, will be going out to look at the sights and sounds and the charamas and the events on the ground in different states that are going to be going to polls. So again, polls on the 12th, and please join us here on the 10th. Again, I apologize we couldn't get through all questions today. Just a shout out again to the work done by both of these gentlemen that is available on our website, ISEAS Perspectives, and also we will be having more more fulcrum commentaries on our website as well. So Marzuki has recently penned 2 perspectives for us. Kian Wing has penned 1 with another one on the way, all dealing with hearts and minds and the upcoming polls. So it really has been very enriching today as we have discussed polls, policies, and perspectives. So with this, we conclude today's discussion, and thank you very much to our 2 gentlemen for, again, having a very civilized, technical, and focused discussion today. And please join us again soon. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank
Goodbye
you.
and have a good day.